When my wife looked me dead in the eye and said, "It's not my duty to fulfill your desires," she thought she was ending an argument. Instead, she just handed me the blueprint for destroying everything she took for granted. What happened next turned our 18-year marriage upside down and taught her a lesson she'll never forget. My name is Clayton Harper. I'm 43 years old, and I've been a volunteer firefighter for 15 years while working as a safety instructor for industrial companies. My wife Brenda is 42, and we've been married for 18 years. We have 2 kids, Tyler, 16, and Chloe, 14. For most of our marriage, things worked well. I handled repairs, yard work, and heavy lifting. Brenda managed finances and the kids' schedules. It seemed like a fair division of labor. But 3 years ago, something started shifting. Brenda stopped asking about my work. She'd scroll through her phone during dinner instead of engaging with family conversation. When I'd suggest watching movies together after the kids went to bed, she'd claim exhaustion. The physical intimacy between us began disappearing gradually. Always an excuse: headache, work stress, tiredness. I didn't push, figuring it was temporary. What bothered me most was how she treated my attempts to connect like interruptions. Serious relationship talks got eye rolls. Surprise date nights got dismissed. Even bringing her coffee in the morning barely earned a thank you. I told myself this was normal. Every marriage has rough patches. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe I wasn't supportive enough. So I doubled my efforts. More housework, more attention to her needs, trying harder to make her happy. But the harder I tried, the more distant she became. She took my increased efforts for granted instead of appreciating them. Coffee in bed went from sweet surprise to expected routine. Flowers went from making her smile to complaints about the expense. Tyler and Chloe started noticing the tension. I'd catch them exchanging glances when their mother would snap at me over trivial things, or when she'd ignore my attempts at dinner conversation. Kids are perceptive. They sense when something's wrong in the family dynamic, even when adults think they're hiding it. The breaking point was still months away, but I can see now how these small changes were building towards something bigger. My wife was systematically withdrawing from our partnership, while I was frantically trying to hold it together through effort and goodwill. I just didn't realize yet that you can't save a marriage single-handedly, no matter how hard you try. The night everything changed started like any other Thursday in October. I'd had a rough day dealing with a factory safety audit that went sideways when management tried to cut corners on equipment inspections. By the time I got home, I was exhausted and looking forward to some basic human connection with my family. I walked through the front door to find Tyler doing homework at the kitchen table and Chloe watching TV in the living room. Brenda was on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling through social media with that blank expression she perfected over the past year. "Hey, honey," I said, setting down my work bag. "How was your day?" Brenda didn't look up from her screen. "Fine," she muttered. I tried again. "The Johnson account gave us some trouble today. Had to write them up for 3 safety violations. You know how some companies think rules don't apply to them." Still no response. Not even a glance in my direction. I sat down next to her on the couch, hoping proximity might encourage actual conversation. "Maybe we could watch something together tonight. That new series you mentioned last week." Brenda sighed dramatically, like I just asked her to climb Mount Everest. "Clayton, I'm tired. Can't you see I'm trying to relax?" "I get that, but we haven't really talked all week. I miss spending time with you." She finally looked at me, but her expression wasn't welcoming. "What do you want from me? I work all day, manage the kids' schedules, handle the household bills, and now I can't even have a few minutes to myself. I'm not asking for much. Just some conversation. Maybe we could plan something for this weekend. Just the 2 of us." That's when her face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. She put down her phone and turned to face me fully, and I knew whatever came next wasn't going to be good. "Listen, Clayton," she said, her voice cold and deliberate. "I need you to understand something. It's not my duty to fulfill your desires. I'm not your personal entertainment system. You want conversation? Call your buddies. You want company? Join a club. But stop expecting me to be responsible for making you happy." The words hit me like a physical blow. In 18 years of marriage, she'd never spoken to me with such calculated cruelty. I sat there, trying to process what she just said. "Brenda, I'm not asking you to entertain me. I'm asking for basic connection between husband and wife. That's what marriage is supposed to be." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Marriage is what I say it is. And right now, I'm saying I don't owe you anything beyond keeping this house running and raising these kids. Your emotional needs, figure them out yourself. Tyler looked up from his homework, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. Chloe had muted the TV and was pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. I felt something shift inside me in that moment. Not anger exactly, but clarity. Crystal clear understanding of what my wife had just revealed about how she viewed our relationship. You know what, Brenda? I said, standing up slowly. You're absolutely right. Duty has nothing to do with it. She smiled, thinking she'd won some kind of victory. She had no idea what she'd just unleashed. I'm glad we finally understand each other, she said, already returning her attention to her phone. I nodded and walked upstairs to our bedroom, my mind racing with the implications of what had just happened. She just established the new rules of our marriage. Rules that were about to apply to both of us equally. For the first time in months, I felt strangely at peace. The confusion was over. The uncertainty was finished. She just told me exactly where I stood, and more importantly, she'd given me permission to stand in exactly the same place. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. Friday morning arrived with crystal clarity. For 18 years, I brought Brenda coffee in bed every single morning. Today, I made coffee for one. I sat at the kitchen table, reading news on my phone. Tyler stumbled downstairs, grabbed cereal, and sat across from me. Dad's mom sick, he asked. Why? She's still in bed. Usually she's down here complaining about something by now. 20 minutes later, I heard Brenda moving around upstairs. She appeared in the kitchen wearing her robe and an irritated expression. Where's my coffee? She asked. I didn't look up from my phone. In the coffee maker. You didn't bring it up to me. No, I didn't. She waited for an explanation. When none came, she huffed and poured her own cup, slamming cabinet doors. What's your problem this morning? I finally looked at her. No problem. Just not in the mood to bring you coffee. Maybe tomorrow I'll feel different. Her eyes narrowed as she recognized her own words. She started to argue, then stormed back upstairs instead. Tyler watched with obvious interest. Dad, what's going on? Just some adult stuff we're working through, son. The weekend continued the same way. Saturday morning, Brenda expected her usual coffee delivery and found me reading, mug in hand. She made her own with considerably more noise. This is ridiculous, she announced. What's ridiculous? I asked. You're acting like a child. I'm acting exactly like you taught me. Following your philosophy about marriage and duty. She couldn't respond to that, so she took her coffee to the living room and cranked up the TV. By Sunday evening, the coffee situation had become a household standoff. Brenda started making pointed comments about my behavior in front of the kids. Your father seems to have forgotten basic courtesy, she said during dinner. Tyler kept eating, glancing between us. Chloe looked confused. I haven't forgotten anything, I replied calmly. I'm applying the same standards you established. Equal treatment. It's not the same thing. Explain how it's different. She opened her mouth, then closed it. We both knew she couldn't defend the double standard. That night, Brenda tried a different approach. Clayton, can't we just go back to normal? What's normal? The version where I do everything for you and you do whatever you feel like. That's not how it was. That's exactly how it was. You just didn't notice because it worked in your favor. So what do you want from me? I don't want anything from you. That's the point. You taught me that wanting things from your spouse is unreasonable. Her face showed she was beginning to understand this wasn't temporary. This was her new reality, built from her own blueprint. Week 2 brought complications. Brenda emerged Monday morning with a new strategy. I've been thinking, she announced over breakfast. Maybe we both need adjustments. I looked up from my eggs. I'm willing to be more appreciative if you'll go back to being the husband I married. Tyler and Chloe exchanged glances, fascinated by our domestic Cold War. That guy was operating under false assumptions, I said. What's that mean? I set down my fork. That husband thought marriage was about partnership and mutual support. You've taught me that's not how you see it. I never said that. You said it wasn't your duty to fulfill my desires. You said I needed to find my own validation. That's different from what you're doing. Ow. She struggled while our kids pretended to be invisible. Emotional support is different from bringing coffee. Why? Because it just is. Tyler snorted with suppressed laughter. Chloe kicked him but couldn't hide her smile. Brenda stood abruptly. This is insane. You're twisting everything. I'm applying your exact logic consistently. She stormed out. Tyler waited until her footsteps faded. Dad, is Mom always going to be this angry? That depends on whether she learns to live by the same rules she wants everyone else to follow. Chloe finally spoke. She's being a hypocrite, isn't she? Your mother is learning that fair treatment works both ways. Sometimes that's uncomfortable. The week continued with Brenda trying various tactics. Hints about being tired, comments about other husbands, even extra niceness for a few days. But I'd learned consistency is everything. If marriage wasn't about obligation, it applied equally. Friday, I came home to find her making my favorite dinner, pot roast with all the trimmings. Good dishes, candles, the dress I'd always complimented. What's the occasion? Just thought I'd do something nice. I enjoyed the meal, complimenting her cooking. She relaxed, thinking she'd found the reset key. After dinner, she cleared dishes and loaded the dishwasher. Normally my job. You don't have to do that, I said. I want to, she replied with an almost genuine smile. When finished, she turned expectantly. So, will things go back to normal now? I looked at her, recognizing the calculation behind the kindness. This was lovely, and I appreciate it. But one nice meal doesn't erase months of taking me for granted. Her face fell. What do you want? I want you to understand real change isn't a transaction. You can't buy it back with pot roast and good behavior. She stared like I was speaking a foreign language. Maybe I was. The language of self-respect. 3 weeks into my new approach, Brenda's birthday arrived. October 15th had always been a big production in our household. Surprise dinners, thoughtful gifts, flowers delivered to her workplace. I genuinely used to enjoy making her feel special and celebrated. This year, I woke up and went through my normal morning routine. No gifts hidden in the closet, no reservations made, no flowers ordered. I made my coffee and sat down with a newspaper. Brenda lingered in bed longer than usual, clearly waiting for the birthday surprise that wasn't coming. When she finally came downstairs, her expectant expression slowly shifted to confusion. So, she said, trying to sound casual, what's the plan for today? I looked up from the sports section. What do you mean? It's my birthday. Right. Happy birthday. I said it the same way I'd say nice weather today, and went back to reading. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Tyler and Chloe were eating breakfast, pretending not to notice the tension, but obviously hanging on every word. That's it, she finally asked. What were you expecting? I don't know, maybe something. It's my birthday, Clayton. Birthdays are supposed to be special. I set down the paper and gave her my full attention. Says who? According to you, it's not my duty to fulfill your desires. Right now, I don't desire to make a big deal out of your birthday. That's completely different. Ow! Because birthdays are different. Everyone celebrates birthdays. Not everyone. Some people don't feel like celebrating. Some people are too tired or stressed to put in the effort. I was using all her greatest hits, throwing her own excuses back with surgical precision. She recognized every deflection she'd used to avoid putting effort into our marriage. You're being cruel. No, I'm being consistent. You taught me that marriage isn't about doing things you don't feel like doing. Right now, I don't feel like celebrating your birthday. Maybe I'll feel different later. Brenda started pacing, clearly agitated. This is ridiculous. You're punishing me. I'm not punishing you. I'm applying your philosophy to your life. You can't have it both ways, declaring that spouses don't owe each other consideration, then getting upset when you don't receive consideration. The argument that followed was intense, but I remained calm. She threw every manipulation tactic she could think of, but I had answers for all of them because they were things she'd said to me before. She said I was being selfish. I reminded her she'd told me to find fulfillment elsewhere instead of expecting her to provide it. She said I was destroying our marriage. I pointed out she'd established that marriage wasn't about mutual obligation. She said I was acting like a child. I mentioned she'd acted like meeting my emotional needs was beneath her. By the end, she was crying frustrated tears. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, just clear understanding that she was experiencing exactly what I'd lived with for months. That evening, she got dressed up and suggested dinner out. Just because, she said. I'm not really in the mood, I replied, settling into my chair with a book. But I made a reservation. You can still go. Or cancel it. Whatever you feel like doing. She stood there dressed up with nowhere to go, finally understanding what casual indifference felt like. The next morning brought a different Brenda, quieter, more thoughtful. She was starting to realize her philosophy had consequences she hadn't considered. When you teach someone that consideration is optional, you can't be surprised when they stop considering you. 2 days after the birthday disaster, Brenda changed tactics completely. She decided to weaponize emotion and recruit outside pressure. She started crying at random moments, sighing dramatically whenever I was in the room, giving me wounded looks like I was the villain in some tragic romance. The performance was impressive. She'd catch me reading and stand there looking forlorn, waiting for me to ask what was wrong. While I didn't take the bait, she'd escalate to tears and little hiccuping sobs. "I don't understand what happened to us," she said one evening, appearing in the living room doorway with perfectly timed tears. "We used to be so happy." I looked up from my book. "Did we? I remember you being happy. I remember me trying to make you happy. But I don't remember us being happy together." She didn't like that response. She was expecting guilt, concern, maybe an immediate rush to comfort her. "You've changed," she said, switching emotional frequencies. "You're not the man I married." "You're right. The man you married was stupid enough to think love meant doing everything for someone who wouldn't do anything in return." When tears didn't work, she brought in reinforcements. Her sister called me at work, lecturing me about treating my wife properly. Her mother showed up at the house, demanding to know why I was being cruel to her daughter. Even our neighbor made comments about marriage requiring compromise. I listened politely to each intervention, then calmly explained the situation. I told them about her declaration that fulfilling my desires wasn't her duty, and how I'd simply adopted the same philosophy. "That's different," her sister insisted, but couldn't explain how. Her mother claimed I was being deliberately difficult while ignoring her daughter's months of deliberate indifference. The neighbor mumbled something about being the bigger person and walked away quickly. None of them could defend the double standard, but none were willing to acknowledge it either. It was easier to paint me as the bad guy than confront the fact that Brenda had created this situation. The pressure campaign intensified. She recruited friends, distant relatives, anyone who'd listened to her version of events. According to her narrative, I'd suddenly become cold and unloving for no reason. She conveniently left out her months of treating me exactly the same way. But I wasn't bothered by social pressure. If anything, it was validating. The fact that she needed an army of people to guilt me back into my old role proved how unsustainable that role had been. A healthy relationship doesn't require outside intervention to function. The breaking point came when she tried using our shared finances as leverage. She informed me she'd made a large purchase without consulting me, something she'd never done before. "I don't feel obligated to discuss my spending decisions with you," she said with a smug expression. I looked at her with genuine admiration. "That's brilliant. You're absolutely right. Financial decisions should be individual choices." Her smugness lasted until the next day when she discovered I'd moved my paycheck to a separate account. "You can't do this," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "Why not? It's my money from my job. According to you, I'm not obligated to share just because we're married. We have bills to pay, responsibilities." "We do, and I'll pay my half, just like a responsible roommate would. But all those extras you've gotten used to, the comfortable lifestyle from having a partner who shares freely, that was a gift, not an obligation. And I don't feel like giving gifts anymore." For the first time since this started, I saw a real fear in her eyes. The 4th week brought an unexpected twist that tested my resolve in ways I hadn't anticipated. Sarah Mitchell, the new safety coordinator at Brennan Industries, had been making her interest increasingly obvious during our weekly meetings. Sarah was 28, smart, and had that confident energy that comes from knowing exactly what she wants. More importantly, she treated me with the respect and appreciation that had been missing from my home life for months. "Clayton, your presentation on equipment protocols was brilliant," she said after our Wednesday meeting, lingering as others filed out. "Would you like to grab dinner and discuss the implementation strategy?" 6 months ago, I would have politely declined and hurried home to a wife who barely acknowledged my existence. Today, I found myself considering the invitation seriously. "I appreciate the offer, Sarah, but I'm married." She smiled knowingly. "I'm not asking you to leave your wife. I'm asking if you'd like to have an actual conversation with someone who values your expertise." The temptation was stronger than I wanted to admit. Here was an attractive woman who found me interesting, who appreciated my knowledge, who looked at me like I mattered. Everything Brenda had stopped doing years ago. Rain check. I said finally. I need to sort some things out at home first. The offer stands whenever you're ready. That evening, I found myself studying my reflection in the bathroom mirror. When did I start looking so tired? Why had I accepted being treated like background noise in my own home? Brenda noticed my distraction during dinner. You're quiet tonight. Just thinking. About what? I looked at her across the table, remembering when she used to care about my thoughts, my day, my feelings. About whether this is how I want to spend the rest of my life. Something in my tone made her stop eating. Tyler and Chloe exchanged glances, recognizing the weight behind my words. What's that supposed to mean? She asked. It means I'm starting to understand why unhappy spouses look elsewhere for what they're not getting at home. Her face went pale. Clayton, are you? Am I what? Looking for basic human connection? Considering spending time with people who actually appreciate my company? Yeah, I am. That's completely different from what we were discussing. Is it? You've spent months telling me that meeting each other's needs isn't part of marriage. Well, maybe you're right. Maybe I should stop expecting you to meet mine and find someone who wants to. The silence that followed was deafening. Brenda stared at me like I'd just announced I was moving to Mars. You wouldn't, she whispered. Wouldn't what? Act exactly like you've been acting? Put my own interests first. Stop caring about someone who doesn't care about me. Tyler cleared his throat uncomfortably. Can I be excused? We're all done here, I said, standing up. Your mother and I understand each other perfectly now. As I walked upstairs, I heard Brenda calling after me, but her voice sounded different now. For the first time in months, she sounded worried rather than annoyed. The possibility of losing me had never occurred to her before tonight. The next morning brought the most honest conversation Brenda and I had shared in years. She was waiting in the kitchen when I came down, still in her robe, eyes red from what looked like a sleepless night. We need to talk, she said without preamble. About what? About what you said last night. About looking elsewhere. I poured my coffee and leaned against the counter. What about it? You can't be serious. Why not? You've established that marriage isn't about obligation or meeting each other's needs. I'm just following your logic to its natural conclusion. Her hand shook as she gripped her coffee mug. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Brenda? Because you've been very clear about your position. You don't owe me consideration, affection, or basic partnership. So why would you expect me to limit my social interactions to someone who's made it clear she doesn't value them? Because we're married. I almost laughed at the irony. Now you want to use marriage as an argument? After months of telling me that being married doesn't create any obligations between us. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, realizing she was trapped by her own reasoning. Look, I continued, I'm not saying I'm having an affair, but I am saying that if marriage doesn't come with mutual obligations, then it doesn't come with exclusive rights either. You're trying to manipulate me. No, I'm trying to show you that your philosophy works both ways. You can't declare independence from marital duties while expecting me to remain bound by them. Chloe appeared in the doorway, clearly having heard our voices. Are you guys getting divorced? The question hung in the air like smoke. Brenda looked at me with something approaching panic, waiting for my answer. That depends on your mother, I said calmly. She needs to decide whether she wants to be married to someone, or just live with someone who pays half the bills. After Chloe left for school, Brenda tried a different approach. What do you want from me, Clayton? Tell me what it would take to fix this. I studied her face, looking for genuine understanding rather than just fear of consequences. I want you to understand that the man you married wasn't weak for caring about you. He wasn't pathetic for wanting to make you happy. And he wasn't wrong for expecting the same consideration in return. I know that. Do you? Because for months, you've treated my attempts to connect as inconveniences. You've dismissed my needs as unreasonable expectations. You've made me feel like wanting basic partnership from my wife was somehow selfish. Tears started forming in her eyes, but these looked different from her previous performances. These looked real. I didn't realize. You didn't want to realize. It was easier to take what I gave while convincing yourself you didn't owe me anything in return. She was quiet for a long moment, processing the truth of what I'd said. So what happens now? Now you prove that you understand the difference between marriage and roommate arrangements. Not with words, but with actions. Consistent actions over time. And if I do that, then maybe we can build something real instead of the one-sided arrangement we've had. And if I don't, I finished my coffee and set the mug in the sink. Then you'll find out what it's like when someone who knows their worth stops settling for less than they deserve. For the first time since this whole thing started, Brenda looked genuinely scared. Not manipulatively worried or strategically concerned, but authentically frightened of losing something she'd finally realized was valuable. It was a start. 2 months into our new reality, Tyler and Chloe decided they'd had enough of walking on eggshells around their parents' Cold War. They cornered us both in the living room on a Saturday evening, presenting a united front that reminded me why I was proud to be their father. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," Tyler announced with the seriousness of someone twice his age. Chloe stood beside him, arms crossed. "We're tired of this weird thing you're both doing." Brenda looked up from her phone, surprised by their intervention. I set down my book, curious to hear what they had to say. "What weird thing?" Brenda asked. "The thing where you both act like you hate each other, but won't just fix it or get divorced," Chloe replied with brutal teenage honesty. Tyler nodded agreement. "It's like living in a house with two strangers who happen to share bills." "Kids, this is complicated adult stuff," Brenda started, but Tyler cut her off. "No, Mom, it's not that complicated. Dad used to do everything for you, and you treated him like garbage. Now he's treating you the same way you treated him, and you don't like it." The bluntness of his assessment made Brenda flinch. "That's not fair. Neither was how you treated Dad," Chloe said firmly. "We saw it. The eye rolls, the complaints, acting like he was bothering you whenever he tried to talk to you. I stayed quiet, letting our children speak their truth without interference. So here's the deal," Tyler continued. "Either you both figure out how to be married again, or get divorced so we can all move on. But we're done living in this house where nobody talks to each other." "We're not getting divorced," Brenda said quickly. "Then start acting married," Chloe shot back. "Dad's been happier these past 2 months than he was for the whole year before. Maybe you should figure out why." After the kids left, Brenda and I sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "They're right, aren't they? About how I treated you." "Yes. And about you being happier now." "Yes." She was quiet for another moment. "I don't want to lose my family, Clayton, but I don't know how to fix what I broke. Start by understanding that I'm not your employee or your servant. I'm your partner, or I was supposed to be. Can we try again? Really try?" I looked at her carefully, searching for genuine commitment rather than just fear of consequences. "That depends on whether you understand why this happened in the first place. Because I stopped appreciating you. I stopped seeing you as a person with needs of his own." It was the first time she'd accurately diagnosed the problem. And because I thought I could take you for granted indefinitely without consequences." "Right. So if we try again, it has to be with the understanding that respect isn't optional. Consideration isn't something you give when you feel like it. Partnership means both people contribute." She nodded, and for the first time in months, I saw the woman I'd originally married looking back at me. "I'd like to try," she said. "Then let's see if you can be consistent about it." 6 months after Brenda declared that fulfilling my desires wasn't her duty, we sat across from each other at the same restaurant where we'd had our first date 20 years ago. But this wasn't the same marriage we'd had before, and we weren't the same people. The woman across from me had learned that respect is earned through actions, not demanded through entitlement. The man she was looking at had learned that love without boundaries becomes servitude, and servitude breeds contempt rather than affection. "You know what's funny?" she said, cutting her steak. "I'm more attracted to you now than I was before all this happened." "Why's that?" "Because you stopped being afraid of losing me. When you started valuing yourself, I remembered why I valued you in the first place." Tyler had gotten accepted to State University on a partial football scholarship. Chloe was thriving in her honors classes and had started dating a boy who actually treated her with respect. Something she said she learned from watching her father demand the same from her mother. The kids seemed happier too, I observed. Kids need to see their parents as equals, not as a servant and master. We were teaching them terrible lessons about relationships. I thought about Sarah from work, who'd been transferred to another district, but had told me before leaving that she respected my commitment to fixing my marriage rather than abandoning it. People respect strength, not weakness. "I confused your kindness for weakness," Brenda admitted. "I thought because you were willing to do anything for me, it meant you had no other options. And I confused your taking me for granted with just being comfortable in the relationship. We'd both learned hard lessons. She discovered that treating a good man poorly doesn't make him try harder. It makes him stop trying at all. I'd learned that being a loving husband doesn't mean accepting disrespectful treatment from a wife who'd forgotten what she had. "Do you forgive me?" she asked. "I've forgiven you. But more importantly, I've learned not to put myself in a position where I need to forgive the same behavior repeatedly." She smiled. "You mean you won't let me take you for granted again?" "I mean I won't take myself for granted again. When you know your worth, you don't accept treatment that contradicts it." The waitress brought our check, and Brenda reached for it automatically. A small gesture that would have been meaningless before, but now represented her understanding that partnership means both people contribute. As we walked to the car, she took my hand. "I love the man you became through all this. I didn't become someone new. I just remembered who I was before I forgot my own value." That night, as I watched her sleep beside me, I reflected on the journey we'd taken. She'd accidentally taught me the most valuable lesson of my adult life. When someone shows you that your happiness doesn't matter to them, believe them, and then show them what life looks like without your happiness in it. Our marriage was stronger now because it was built on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. She'd learned that a woman who truly wants a husband doesn't want a man who accepts being treated like garbage. She wants a man who knows his worth and demands to be treated accordingly. Sometimes the best way to save a marriage is to be willing to lose it. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their worst behavior. Brenda had said it wasn't her duty to fulfill my desires. She was right, but it also wasn't my duty to fulfill hers. Once we both understood that marriage is a voluntary partnership between equals, we could finally build something worth keeping.